Malit scout ship, watcher of Trilfir, polar orbit of the third moon, 328,272 light-years from Faria Prime. As Skarl collapsed on the communications panel, Hrethnir felt things rapidly spiraling out of its control. The embassy was under attack. The Republic fleet and the Farian defense forces in orbit of Faria Prime were now attacking each other, and the AI assistant embedded within its brain presented an outcome based on its calculations. It had to decide, and Hrethnir made the only choice available to it. It was time to show the Quadrant what was coming, and to force them to see that the only way to survive was to fight as one against the true enemy of life. Hrethnir sent a command to the cloaked dreadnoughts in the inner and outer system. It was time to end this once and for all. He will order the First Prime to stand down, and then he will order Admiral Thompson to do the same. Faria Prime, Kepler 62, 989 light-years from Earth. Office of the First Prime, Kingdom of Faria. Skarl! His hatch brother did not answer him, and the First Prime saw Skarl's eyes close as he collapsed onto the panel in front of him, his esophagus hanging out of his mouth. Skarl, please answer me, hatch brother. An exosuit stepped into viewing range behind Skarl's limp body, and he clamped his mouth shut, shocked at the sudden appearance of a Malit. First Prime, I am Hrethnir of the High Council. Skarl is still alive. He has merely lost consciousness. You will listen to me and obey my commands if you want to limit any further loss of life. He flicked his head rapidly, showing his willingness to do as the Malit commanded him. Good. We have successfully disabled all the viral bombs. Your hatchlings and eggs are no longer in danger. You will call off your attack on the Republic Embassy and order your ships to stand down now. Our ships, why do they need— His assistant came charging into the office, followed by Commodore Thanik, who bellowed loudly at him. First Prime, the Republic is here. Our ships in orbit are being overwhelmed. We need to call in the outer system forces to defend Faria Pre. You will order all ships to stand down now, First Prime. The Malit interrupted, its speakers blaring loudly to drown out any others that thought to speak. The First Prime froze, the two opposing desires of the Commodore and the Honored Elder crippling him. The Malit domain will do to Faria Prime what we have done to the Omnians if you do not obey, First Prime. The Malit added, its speakers no longer blaring but sounding more ominous and terrifying for the threat the Honored Elder had just issued. It was what the First Prime needed to hear to jolt him out of his indecision, and he spun around to the Commodore. Order all ships to stand down now. The Commodore flicked his head in distress, not understanding the order. First Prime, we must— You will order the ships to stand down, or I will have you flayed for treason against our king. The First Prime roared, flecks of spittle erupting from his mouth and hitting the Commodore in the face as his assistant turned around and fled, taking only 2 hops to reach the door before she disappeared. The Commodore seemed like he wanted to flee as well, but to his credit, he remained where he was and yanked the comm unit off his uniform and began to bark orders into it for all defense units to stand down, adding that any ship operators who failed to comply would be flayed for treason against the king. The First Prime turned back towards the holoscreen and bowed to the Honored Elder before speaking. We obey, Honored Elder. The exosuit raised a hand in acknowledgement before the speakers activated again. You will see that you have made the best possible choice for your world and your people, First Prime. The holoscreen vanished, and the First Prime felt himself start trembling as relief flooded through his body. He believed the Honored Elder entirely when it said that, and he hopped to his desk to order the attack on the embassy to cease immediately. He will order the entire military to stand down. He will not be responsible for Faria Prime reverting back to a pre-industrial society like those arrogant Omnians. Their precious hatchlings and eggs were now free from danger according to the Honored Elder. Somehow, Skarl was able to secure the help of the Malit domain in freeing them from the clutches of the agents. After he ordered the military to stand down, he would go find the agent and kill it slowly with his own hands, before hunting the rest of them down and making them suffer for what they had done to his people. RSS Indomitable, Independence-class carrier, 7th Fleet, 348,228 kilometers from Faria Prime. June 13th, 0807 ship time. Helm, what the hell happened? Why did we transition so close to Faria Prime? Senior Captain Ruggeri demanded, his voice cutting through the confused babbling of the various stations as the bridge crew tried to coordinate with each other to verify the position of the Indomitable and its escorts. Captain, my AI is giving me conflicting information, but I think the Farians have a stealth minefield further out we didn't know about, and the Dreadnought AIs hacked our navigational systems to make us transition past the minefield. We would have emerged right in the middle of it, sir. Holy shit, that would have been a cluster. Admiral Thompson never got a chance to finish what he was saying as the main viewer flared brightly before the automated systems dimmed it as 3 miniature suns appeared less than 70 kilometers from the bow of the Indomitable. 3 Farian heavy destroyers just lost core containment. The debris is heading right for us, the tactical officer yelled out in warning, followed by the ship's battle AI Bologna triggering the imminent impact alarm as her voice came over the intercom. Brace for impact. Ruggeri gripped the armrests and gritted his teeth as he felt the restraint system pulling him against the chair. 2 seconds later, the Indomitable was pelted by debris that shook the massive vessel as the hull rang like a bell from the impacts. Multiple hull breaches detected, initiating damage control procedures. Tactical status of the landing bays, Ruggeri called out as he stared at the damage control screen Bologna was displaying. Bays 1, 3, and 4 are fully functional. Bay 2 was hit with debris, and Deck Boss says she needs at least a half hour to get it operational again. She has 15 minutes. Launch all available fighters and bombers. Aye, Captain. Launching now. Bologna, display all enemy, display all Farian ships in the battle space. He called out, rejecting the enemy designation for now as the ship shuddered slightly from the dozens of fighters and bombers being launched out of their tubes. Tactical. Have the fighters form a screen around us and our escorts, and I want the bombers to loiter in a holding pattern until we need them. Aye, sir. Looking back at the holotank, Ruggeri efficiently cataloged all the different colored icons populating the screen, not happy with the number of green Farian icons amidst the sea of blue icons representing 7th Fleet. 2 of the green icons turned red before being listed as Zeta status, and he cursed as another 4 blue icons turned orange, indicating moderate damage. Why haven't the goddamn dreadnoughts decloaked yet? Captain, I want to broadcast a message to the remaining Farian ships near us. We need to get them to stand down before this reaches the point of no return. The troop ships are almost at the drop point, and the planetary defense forces are going to open fire on them if we don't get this under control. Admiral Thompson said urgently from next to him, framing it as a request, not an order, which he appreciated. Aye, Admiral, comms. Open a channel for the Admiral and broadcast on all frequencies. Tactical, send a request to the dreadnoughts asking them to decloak. Aye, sir. Both the comms and tactical officers responded almost simultaneously as Ruggeri eyed the holotank again. The troop ships will reach their drop points in less than a minute, and now there were only 22 Farian ships remaining in orbit, most of them colored in various shades ranging from yellow to dark orange. Channel open, sirs, comms called out as the intercom system chirped. He looked at the Admiral and gave him the go-ahead signal, and Carl put up the privacy screen around him to record his message without the din of the bridge interfering. Tactical. What's going on with the dreadnoughts? Why haven't they decloaked yet? He demanded as he nervously eyed the icons of the hundreds of Farian ships that were scattered throughout the outer system. Some of them were already moving towards the 7th Fleet, while other groups of green icons were showing signs of imminent null space activation, which meant they were most likely going to enter null space and then flash back out to defend their homeworld. Sir, the AIs responded and said they received overriding orders. They did not clarify what that meant before closing the channel. The comm officer answered, clearly miffed about being hung up on by the dreadnought AIs. He was just about to order another channel to be opened to the dreadnoughts when the privacy screen around the Admiral came down, and Carl grabbed his right arm in an iron grip, his eyes filled with panic. Dom, initiate Protocol 10 now. All ships need to power down their weapons and shut down the automated defense systems immediately. What? They are still firing on us, and more are— Do it, Dom. Now! Carl demanded as he cut him off, his voice filled with a fear he had never heard from his best friend before. The anxiety in the Admiral's voice, and the fact that he was using his first name on the bridge in the middle of combat no less. sent a chill down his spine, and he practically screamed out the new orders, feeding off Carl's palpable apprehension. Bologna, initiate Protocol 10. All weapons and automated defense systems are to be powered down immediately. He smashed his thumb against the biometric scanner on the panel in front of him and glanced back at Carl, wondering what the hell was going on, as Carl did the same with the scanner in front of him to verify the order and fulfill the two-person command rank requirement to initiate the protocol. After they both verified the protocol with their thumbprints, Bologna acknowledged the order, which had never been activated before in Republic naval history as far as he knew. Protocol 10 was a command override that would allow the battle AI of every ship to take over all ship functions and carry out the orders of the fleet commanders only. "What the fuck is going on?" he whispered urgently as he leaned closer to the Admiral. "Honored Elder Hrethner hacked my wrist comm and ordered me to stand down the fleet, or the Republic would face Class 4 sanctions." Carl answered ominously as he pointed towards the main viewer. "It will be speaking to us momentarily." Ruggieri looked back at the viewer and cursed as he watched the Gallipoli, an older class heavy cruiser, begin ejecting escape pods as the severely damaged ship started tumbling out of control. Bologna's voice came back over the intercoms. "Protocol 10 initiated, Captain. All weapon systems and automated defense systems are powered down, and the battle AIs are engaging in evasive maneuvers only." He thanked her as he watched the Gallipoli continue her death spiral, no longer ejecting escape pods. The small number of pods being tracked by Bologna was heartbreaking. They were nowhere near enough to account for the nearly 800-strong crew, and he silently prayed for the ones who didn't make it out. The Farian ships that had been attacking the Gallipoli mercifully stopped firing on her once the escape pods started ejecting, and he vowed not to forget the proper conduct of the Farian forces no matter what happened here. Even as those same Farian ships began to fire on a nearby squadron of light cruisers that had been coming to rescue their sister ship. A flurry of panicked voices erupted from all the bridge stations as Bologna changed the viewer perspective, and his eyes widened at the sight of the massive Malit dreadnought currently decloaking right in the middle of the battle space. The Republic ships had stopped firing as soon as the fleet-wide order was issued, and their battle AIs were currently engaging in evasive maneuvers as the last 18 heavily damaged Farian ships continued to fire at them with what functional weapons they still had. The dreadnought's smooth, silvery hull began to shift as weapons ports emerged, and the bridge crew fell deathly silent as all 18 Farian ships simply broke apart less than 3 seconds later, the Malit particle accelerator beams that destroyed them invisible to the naked eye. "Those poor bastards," Carl muttered quietly, echoing his own sentiments exactly as he stared at the pitifully small debris clouds marking the location where thousands of Farians just had their lives extinguished by the Dreadnought AI. "Captain, the Dreadnought AI is trying to override the communication systems. I'm engaging counter-intrusion system." Bologna's voice suddenly cut out, only to be replaced with a dispassionate synthesized voice that somehow seemed to sound neither masculine nor feminine. "All ships are ordered to power down their weapons systems and maintain their current positions on the order of the High Council of the Malit domain. Any ships violating this order will be destroyed, and their governments will be subjected to Class 4 sanctions. An exception has been made for the Republic troop ships and armored carriers currently in orbit of Faria Prime. Any attempt to attack these ships or the humans within them will result in the destruction of the violators. Any orbital and land-based weapon systems that fire on the landing forces will be destroyed, and such an act will be considered a declaration of war against the Republic of Humanity, necessitating an overwhelming response by the Malit domain to defend its allies. Honored Elder Hrethner of the High Council of the Malit domain will address you now." There was a chime, and another computerized voice came over the intercom, though this time there was a sense that a living being was speaking and not an AI. "I am Honored Elder Hrethner, representing the High Council of the Malit domain. All combat between the Kingdom of Faria and the Republic of Humanity will cease now, or the Dreadnought AI will immediately destroy any ship violating the ceasefire. The Republic forces will be landing to secure the embassy and rescue their citizens, as well as to secure certain targets on the surface. Any interference by the Kingdom of Faria and its military forces will be construed as an act of war and severely penalized by the Malit domain. This ends now. A Malit scout ship has recently returned with a report on the Balrican forces heading towards the quadrant to exterminate all who reside within it. I will share their report now. You would be wise to examine the information. There was another chime, and Bologna came back over the intercom for the first time since the Dreadnought AI hacked the communication system. Captain, we have received a data burst containing 273.6 exabytes of information. While it will take 28.7 hours to scan the contents of the data burst for malicious programs. Several files have urgent tags attached to them for immediate review. He shared a look with the Admiral, who gave him a nod. That's not needed, Bologna. Download the data burst and display the files with the tags, thank you. Affirmative, Captain. One moment, please. A few seconds later, a dozen hollow screens shimmered into existence, all displaying Malit script with videos and data tables. Bologna converted the script to Republic Standard, and there was not a sound to be heard on the bridge as they saw what must have been hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Balrican ships assembled in dozens of systems. All the scouted systems were plotted on the Malit astrometric charts, pointing along a single axis of advance that led directly towards the quadrant. Behind the Balricans, thousands of star systems were shaded red, outlining the bloody swath that had been cut across thousands of light years. The other hollow screens showed the results of the Balrican advance, the hundreds of precious and rare habitable worlds that once teemed with life, now nothing more than spinning orbs of death where trillions of sapient and sentient life forms once dwelled. Smaller screens displayed a rotating stream of images displaying the unique species that once inhabited these now lifeless worlds that had not yet been discovered, and now never would be because of the Balricans. The wide variety of uncontacted life forms was both astonishing and heart-rending. They had made it through the brutal filter of evolution and random chance, proving their fitness and hard-earned right to exist only to be exterminated by invaders who viewed them as nothing more than vermin to be eradicated and prey to fill their bellies. Honored Elder Hrethner came over the intercom again, and this time there was detectable emotion imbued in its words. Our estimates are that 3.4 to 3.8 trillion sapient life forms have been exterminated through various means, and trillions of faunae weighing over 7 dralats as well. They are coming for us all. This ends now. The old troubles and interspecies conflicts between the younger races no longer matter. The Malit domain will discard its long-standing policy of non-interference starting now. Any species, governments, and stellar organizations that defy us will suffer the same fate as the Omnians, and none will come to save you when the Balricans descend on your defenseless worlds to feast on them like ravenous locusts. You have been warned. What happens next is entirely dependent upon your actions, and our wrath will know no bounds. We know what it is to be alone among a graveyard of trillions, and we shall not drink from that bitter cup of death again. There was another chime, and Bologna came back over the intercoms. The channel has been closed. No one on the bridge uttered a sound, and Ruggieri didn't blame them one bit as he turned to look at the XO sitting to his left. Carvalho's almost black skin was a shade of ghostly pallor, and he could see her chest rising and deflating rapidly as she continued to stare at the holoscreens displaying the almost 2 million Balrican ships coming to kill and feast on everyone she ever knew and loved. He looked away from her. There was nothing he could say or do that would help her right now. He glanced to his right, and Carl turned to face him, his face a stone mask as their eyes locked. Same with Carvalho, there was nothing to be said. Turning back to look at the multiple screens filled with hundreds of thousands of ships, mobile shipyards, refineries, and great caravans of troopships that were holding billions of Balrican warriors, he felt his stomach clenching in primal fear. They knew they were coming, and in his heart he truly believed they had a chance if they could get the entire quadrant to unify. That belief was based upon the number of ships the Republic scouts and spy drones were reporting in the Forbidden Zone, which was now tallied at just under 300,000. The Malit scout ships, with their far superior technology and less deadly fold space engines, were able to go further and scout the true extent of what was coming. He looked at the number of confirmed Balrican warships being displayed under the astrometric charts and called out in a shaking voice, Bologna, am I reading this right? Does that say 1.2 million warships? Affirmative, Captain. There are 3 other files marked as urgent, but they can only be viewed by Admiral Thompson and President Lopez upon proper biometric verification and within a privacy field to view the files. Why the hell didn't you tell me that, Bologna? The Admiral demanded angrily before muttering under his breath as he erected the privacy field around himself again. Looking back at the holotank, Ruggeri eyed the imposing dreadnought in the middle of the battle space as both the Republic fleet and the surviving Farian defense units reorganized themselves on either side of the Malit ship. So far, the Farian ships were refraining from firing on any of the Republic ships, though hundreds of Farian ships from further out were currently streaming towards Faria Prime. The troop ships and armored carriers were at their drop points, and thousands of drop pods and biosynths were already within the mesosphere, the friction of their passage turning them into fiery orbs as they headed towards their targets. Bologna seemed to have everything in hand as she used the command override of Protocol 10 to reorganize the fleet into loose formations in case the Farians decided to resume hostilities. He glanced down at his panel, dreading the number of messages he knew was waiting for him from the irate captains of the fleet, most likely demanding to know why they still haven't had ship control returned to them. As he began to type out a fleet-wide update, he was startled by a hand suddenly grabbing his right arm, and he stopped what he was doing to look at the Admiral. Carl's face was almost ghost-white, and he felt his heart dropping to his stomach as a privacy screen went up around only him and Carl. Staring at him with haunted eyes, it took Carl a few moments before he finally started to speak, his voice just barely above a whisper. "Dom, this doesn't leave us. If you speak of this, I will have you hanged for treason. Do you understand me? Decide now if you want to know or not." He stared at his best friend in shock, not truly believing that Carl just threatened to have him hanged for treason. Carl's eyes held no lies within them, and he knew the threat was very real as he saw true fear within them. "I understand. Show me," he whispered back, immediately regretting it as he said the words. Carl gazed at him for another long moment, those blue and white orbs searching his face to see if he really wanted to risk his life for this. Regret filled Carl's eyes, and he gave a curt nod before looking away and typing on his panel for a few seconds as he began whispering again. "I cannot show you what I just saw. The Malit files deleted themselves after I viewed them, but I can give you an idea of what I just learned." A star chart of the quadrant came up in the air in front of them, and Carl used his trembling fingers to zoom out until a radius of 10,000 light-years surrounding the quadrant appeared, and both the Perseus and Sagittarius arms were now visible. Working quickly, the Admiral began to plot out all the locations of the homeworlds of the major species and sloppily drew out approximate outlines of their territories with his fingers, and though it looked like a 5-year-old did it, Ruggeri saw the beginnings of a rough map being drawn in front of him by Carl. Towards the galactic rim, Carl squiggled red lines across a massive section of the star chart that encompassed a significant portion of the Orion spur where it connected to the Perseus arm before boxing it off with a red border, and he instinctively knew he was looking at the red-swathed area that was shown on the Malit astrometric charts. Carl drew a slightly curved dotted line in red, and then wrote out 1.2 mil before drawing an arrow pointing towards the quadrant until it hit the furthest known extent of insectoid territory closest to the Balrican advance. In the middle of the long arrow, he drew a large oblong circle and then wrote FB, 300K. That must be the Forbidden Zone, he thought to himself as Carl then drew 2 more long red arrows, but from 2 opposite directions. One arrow came from the edge of the void between the Perseus arm and the Orion arm, cutting through the Orion Nebula before terminating at the boundary of the quadrant. The other red arrow came from the Vela Molecular Ridge area, cutting across the Gum Nebula before terminating along the boundary of the quadrant facing the Sagittarius arm and the galactic core. At the end of the first arrow pointing from the Perseus arm, Carl put a dotted line and then wrote 600K before going to the end of the second line, where it started from the Vela Molecular Ridge, and putting another dotted line with 380K. At the bottom of the star chart, Carl wrote out 2.4 mil warships before finally leaning back in his chair and glancing sideways at him with a resigned expression. He stared at the map for a few seconds, and he understood now why the Malit did not share the information about the two other Balrican fleets of almost another 1 million warships that would be attacking the quadrant in a pincer attack from 3 sides. If the other species found out about this, they would have already surrendered to their despair when the Balricans finally arrived, the war already lost in their hearts and minds before they even began to fight. I wish I didn't agree to see this, Carl," he whispered, trying to keep the dread he was feeling out of his voice and failing miserably as Carl looked at him. "I know, Dom. I'm sorry." He cleared his throat to speak again when a red alarm light began to flash on the panel, and Carl quickly deleted the star map before dropping the privacy field, the sounds of the bridge returning to them as a panicked babble of voices assaulted their ears. "Another 2 biosynths have been hit. Order them to disperse. 64 confirmed dead, 14 from 2nd Battalion, 327th Infantry." Seeing that the privacy field was down, Lieutenant Baumer began to update them from the tactical station, her strident voice cutting across the bridge. "Certain elements of the Farian ground forces have started firing on our troops still in the air. Almost 100 dead and 300 being listed as out of action so far, sirs." "Get a hold of yourself, Baumer. Put up a hollow for me. Are the Farian ships firing on us?" "Negative, sir. Putting up a hollow for you, Baumer stopped speaking for a second before she looked back up at him and the Admiral. "The Dreadnought is reconfiguring its hull. Oh shit. Malit destroyers are coming out of the Dreadnought, sir. 5 Destro 8 destroyers. Correction, there are now 12 Malit destroyers heading towards the Farian ships." Carl yelled out to Baumer, his voice filled with fury. "God damn it! Tactical, get the commanders of the ground forces on the line now. I want to—" Baumer cut him off as she looked back up from her station, her voice filled with fear. "Sirs, the Dreadnought is moving towards Faria Prime. They are opening all their weapons ports and pointing them towards the surface." He and Carl both looked at each other at the same time, Carl's grim expression mirroring exactly how he felt as they both looked back towards the holotank. The Farians were about to find out just how badly they had screwed themselves. Embassy of the Republic of Humanity. Kovac grunted as he dropped back behind the 1.5-meter tall parapet, feeling the impacts of the Farian plasma bolts against his back as they slammed into the plastcrete blocks and crackled loudly before fizzling out. Some of the bolts passed over the edge and right through where he had just been firing from a second ago, the small plasma bolts arcing viciously as they interacted with air molecules and filled the surrounding area with static electricity. "Jesus, that was close," he muttered to himself as he glanced at the ammo readout being listed on the HUD. 214 was flashing in the upper right corner, and his suit battery icon was showing slightly less than half full, with a smaller 43% listed next to it. He only had one last full magazine after this one ran out, and then he would have to leave his position to fix the battery pack that had been damaged before it died on him. Flicking his selector to 3-round bursts, he scooted over 2 meters to his right and then took several short, sharp breaths before popping back up and aiming at the Farian troops still advancing on the walls. The damn froggies attacking the embassy weren't as incompetent as everybody liked to make them out to be, and he used his eyes to switch the HUD targeting screen back to infrared as he stabilized his rifle on the parapet ledge before sending a 3-round burst at them. The Farians had deployed radioactive smoke to screen their movements, and they were also firing a rolling barrage of reflective chaff mortars ahead of their advance that made it nigh impossible to see individual targets with the naked eye or regular HUD targeting lens. The combination of the smoke grenades and the chaff made it difficult to isolate individual Farians, and though the damned Kermits all looked fat and out of shape, they were incredibly agile, hopping from cover to cover and causing him to miss almost 75% of his shots. Even the stealth spy drones had trouble seeing through all that shit, and the embassy defenders had been forced to switch to infrared targeting, which was barely any better. It was the middle of the day, and the massive red giant was putting out a tremendous amount of heat and radiation that made it incredibly difficult to isolate the mesothermic Farians from the surrounding environment. He fired another 3-round burst, finally nailing the speedy bastard he had been targeting. He threw himself back down behind the parapet again as Pepe's friends returned a ridiculous amount of fire at his position that seemed to last forever before the sounds of sizzling plastcrete finally ceased. He swore loudly as he scooted over another 4 meters in the opposite direction, determined to make these froggies play whack-a-mole with him for as long as possible before they finally nailed him. Whatever people had to say about the skill of the Farian Navy did not apply to the ground troops currently coming to take the embassy from them. The Farians had already lost over 200 troops, with another 300 wounded, and they still came on with no sign of hesitation or breakdown of unit discipline, which surprised him greatly. He had to grudgingly respect their willingness to absorb the punishment being inflicted upon them as they continued to claw their way closer to the walls, and he had no problem giving them such respect as they finally passed the 500-meter mark. Kaminsky's voice came over the command channel along with the sound of sliver rounds and plasma bolts firing in the background. Sector 5, we have 2 bandits approaching your position from the northwest at an altitude of 35 meters. ETA is 22 seconds. All biosynths near Sector 5. Prepare for anti-air action. Shit, that's us, he muttered as he looked to his left and right, not seeing any biosynths near his position. Only 2 pathfinders 30 meters to his right and another one 26 meters to his left. The Farian snipers were damned good, and the 12 pathfinders defending this sector were now down to 7, with Martinez and Smith having been killed by sniper headshots and the rest seriously wounded. None of them had any handheld Hornets left on their backs, and he had used his last one a few minutes ago to take out a Farian spy drone that was observing their positions and zeroing in the Farian sniper fire. He called out over the open command channel for backup, not embarrassed in the least by the anxiousness of his tone. "This is Kovac. We need help here. We have no anti-air assets or Hornets left in Sector 5. Almost immediately, he got a response. "Calm your tits, Mushy. I am on my way to you now." Kovac couldn't help but laugh out loud at what the biosynth just said over the command channel, and he recognized the alluring voice of Sergeant Duran from the barest hint of the cute-as-hell Montreal province accent that did things to him despite her being a 2-ton fighting machine. Every time he heard her talking, he immediately envisioned a doe-eyed brunette with a bob haircut and a silk robe, lying on a chaise with provocative red lips pulling on a cigarette, and he would affectionately call her Mon Chéri whenever they were alone. She would respond to his earnest affection by either making gagging, retching noises from her speakers, or by seductively threatening to tear his manhood off and shove it up his ass if he dared to defile her suit with his tobacco-stained fingers. He smiled as he heard other pathfinders giggling over the open command channel at Duran's comment, loving his troops even more than he already did for their willingness to laugh even in the face of their impending doom. Duran's voice came back over the channel 2 seconds later, followed by the sound of plastcrete cracking near his position. "I am here." Turning to his left, he could now see Duran's large exosuit 5 meters from his position, using the climbing hooks from her torso chassis to cling to the lower ledge of the landing so she would not expose her 2.5-meter-tall combat suit above the short parapet. He laughed again in nervous relief as the biosynth deployed her shoulder-mounted missile launcher and pointed it above the parapet to the northwest of their position, where Controller Kaminsky said they were coming from. "Sergeant, thanks for coming," he called out to her appreciatively as her missile launcher made its final, minute corrections and locked on the 2 hovercopters that were now less than 3 kilometers away with the help of a high-altitude stealth spy drone. She didn't bother to grace him with a reply as the 2 missiles fired from her launcher almost simultaneously, the shotgun shell-sized munitions streaking upwards before angling back down and then towards the 2 hovercopters at over 3,000 kilometers an hour. Kovac didn't even have time to peek over the parapet to see the results of the strike before the missiles impacted the 2 bandits. By the time he got his helmet camera extended to look over the lip, all he could see on the HUD were 2 fireballs smashing into the ground, and he joined in on the cheering of the others over the command channel for a few moments before barking at them to cut it out and focus on their sectors. The Farian tanks and AFVs had been holding position just over 600 meters away ever since the assault began, which just so happened to be 100 meters beyond the range of the treaty-restricted embassy self-defense artillery. and he felt his stomach knotting as dozens of them surged forward to finally join the assault. The treaty restrictions also stipulated the allowed ammunition and munition stores within the embassy, which were rigorously inspected and enforced by the Farian government every 3 solar months. They only had 50 anti-armor rounds for their M350 mortars, and the chances of them hitting a target with all that shit the Farians were putting out to cover their advance were unlikely, not to mention the standard jamming and self-defense systems already installed on Farian armor platforms, which made it go from unlikely to downright abysmal. "Sergeant, they are sending their heavies in. Are you guys ready for them?" he called out nervously as his HUD began to display the approaching armor icons. "Oui, Staff Sergeant. We are ready for them, at least for as long as our ammunition lasts." Her grapplers let go of the ledge, and she dropped back down the 15-meter height, her landing jets activating right before her foot pads hit the ground to cushion her fall. Duran's suit reconfigured into its anti-armor configuration over the next 5 seconds, a thrilling sight that always buoyed his spirits, especially now. Reluctantly, he turned back to face the advancing Farians and popped back up, sending 2 bursts at the froggies to remind them that he was still there before displacing 6 meters to the right. As he moved, he toggled the private channel and connected to Duran's to speak with her alone. "Mon chéri, I got your back. Good hunting." Surprisingly, she didn't respond with her usual dry, heaving sounds, and he felt his heart quicken as she replied to him in an almost tender way. "Oui, Mushi, I know you do. Merci, Kovac." The channel clicked and then went silent as Duran closed it on her end, and he fell in love with the woman in his mind all over again as he watched her lope towards the wall at a full sprint with 2 other biosynths. They activated their jump jets 5 meters from the wall and gracefully cleared the parapet in a ballet of precision before landing on the purple grass in front of the walls and disappearing from view. The stealth systems activated while they were descending, and he was only able to track them on his HUD by virtue of the IFF system as they sprinted towards the Farian armored vehicles. He switched the rifle selector to sniper mode and activated his suit's stealth systems before popping back up and stabilizing the rifle on the parapet ledge. The stealth shroud will drain his battery quickly, but he had a good minute or 2 to cover her advance before having to turn it off. Switching to infrared, he sighted down the barrel and started sending sliver rounds downrange ahead of Durand and her companions, specifically seeking out heavy weapon teams that could threaten the biosynths. "Come on, you bastards. Lay down suppressing fire to cover the advance of the biosynths in your sectors. 10 beers on me for every confirmed headshot you get on these herpes-addled, wart-covered dickheads." There was a resounding war cry in response to his challenge from the others over the command channel, and he zeroed in on his first victims as he lined up the targeting reticule on a Farian heavy weapons team setting up their version of a crew-served plasma turret. 67 meters from embassy walls, Sector 5. ATS Biosynth Model 7, 8th ATS Tactical Regiment, Operator Elina Durand. "Watch your spacing and stay low. I'll take the middle. Wait for my signal." The others signaled that they understood, and Duran's HUD showed the 2 icons moving to the left and right of her position to flank the heavy weapons team setting up the plasma turret 22 meters in front of them. Right before she gave the signal to attack, one of the froggies' heads disappeared in a cloud of purple mist, the death whistle of the passing sliver following the round less than a second later as the remaining 3 Farians threw themselves to the ground. "Now!" she hissed, determined to take advantage of the opportunity. She charged forward, bringing her heavy cannon to bear as she settled the targeting reticle on the power pack of the plasma turret and let loose a 20-round burst of 20 mm high-explosive slivers. The pack exploded violently, tearing apart the 3 Farians that were still kissing dirt and sending chunks of purple flesh outwards. "Target neutralized. Taggart, take the AFV to your right. Flores with me. We are going for the tank 43 meters ahead of us." Reaching the Farian position, she jumped over it, her recording devices showing a pip in the corner of her HUD of the purple mess within the now smoking crater where the plasma turret and 4 Farians used to be. Landing lightly on the ground, she felt her suit accelerating in response to her neural inputs, and she smiled inwardly as she saw the speed indicator reach 145 kpah. She set the speed governor to maintain that pace and not go any faster to prevent the stealth shroud from potentially glitching. Flores's icon had been cutting across the field diagonally and finally fell in beside her as they neared the tank she wanted to destroy. Taggart's icon blinked red as he reached his target, an AFV that had a squad of Farian assault troops inside of it. Duran put up a PIP showing Taggart's POV and watched as he jumped over the AFV, his heavy cannon pumping rounds into the thinner armor at the top before spinning in the air to land facing the back of the armored vehicle. The exit hatch opened, the door ramp slamming onto the ground with a loud clang and revealing an interior filled with shredded Farians. Taggart fired again, killing any that were still alive before pivoting back around to locate and engage another target. Nearing their own target, Durand and Flores spread apart as they activated their missile launchers and selected anti-armor. The Farian tank crew, seeing that the AFV was under attack, had veered in that direction, and now the weaker armored side was exposed. They both targeted the aft section by the main engine compartment, and Flores fired first, Durand following right behind it. The first missile impacted, and then the second missile hit, breaking through what little armor remained after the first impact, and the tank turret blew off as the interior ammo compartments exploded. The low-profile turret flipped over several times before slamming back onto the ground with a resounding crash, almost crushing Flores, who barely managed to dodge out of the way in time. "Flores, target the AFV to your right. I am going for the one next to it." "Copy." Durand veered slightly to the left towards her new target, another AFV 82 meters away. She quickly closed the distance, keeping low to the ground as the Farians began to indiscriminately fire their weapons in a sweeping motion, as they realized they were being destroyed by an enemy they could not see. She came to a sliding halt alongside the AFV and fired a long burst into the side before surging to the back and ripping the exit hatch off its hinges. The sole survivor, half buried under the bloody bodies of his now dead comrades, fired a plasma rifle at full and screamed Farian curses, the bolts sizzling as they impotently splashed against her armored torso and caused her shroud to flicker. Reaching inside with her hand, she yanked out the still screaming Farian and slammed him into the ground just hard enough to momentarily stun him before she ripped the smoking plasma rifle from his hand, breaking his fingers and wrists in the process. She curled her own finger and carefully flicked him in the side of the head, using her large, heavy digit as an impromptu club and knocking him out cold. Such bravery deserved respect, and he had earned the right to live and pass on his warrior genes to future generations in her estimation. After shoving him into the space under the disabled AFV, she pivoted around to look for another target. It took her a second to realize that the Farian armored vehicles and tanks were no longer advancing, but retreating instead, going in full reverse without turning and exposing their lightly armored aft sections. As they did so, Farian troops that had been lying on the ground in shallow depressions for cover began to pop up and retreat with the armored vehicles, hiding behind them as they left their fighting positions. Watching them pull back, she wondered why they would suddenly retreat after all the killed and wounded they had suffered. Whatever the reason for their unexpected withdrawal, now was the perfect time to return to the embassy without worrying about enemy fire. "Cease fire. Do not pursue. Return to the embassy." As Taggart and Flores acknowledged her command, she bent down to look at the still unconscious Farian under the AFV. He was in no danger of dying according to the scanners, only moderately injured with a concussion and a few broken bones. Activating her external speakers, she lowered the volume and spoke gently to the Farian in its own language. "I hope you live a good and long life, brave Farian. I will not spare you a second time if you take up arms against us again." Durand dropped a locator beacon next to the Farian to alert his comrades to his location and straightened back up, quickly scanning the area to make sure the Farians were still retreating before turning back towards the embassy and heading for the walls in a loping gait. The answer to her question as to why the Farians had suddenly stopped attacking was answered a moment later as she saw hundreds of fireballs appearing in the ruddy sky above the embassy, her HUD identifying them as friendlies from the 101st Airborne and the 10th Mountain Division. The Republic was here, and she added her own war cry to the others, now flooding the command channel as the embassy defenders saw their avenging angels falling from the heavens. Faria Prime, Sklonak District, 1,358 likhals from the capital. Force Leader Jarlit stared at the back of the 4th Prime's head in shock, sure that he had misheard the countermanding orders he was just given. 4th Prime, I heard the initial orders with you. We were ordered to stand down or be flayed for treason against the king by the 1st Prime himself. The 4th Prime slowly turned around to face him, and he felt his stomach clenching as he saw the wide smile on the 4th Prime's face underneath eyes devoid of emotion. I've received a new set of orders from the 1st Prime. The king has decided, after all, that the honor of Faria demanded we respond to this affront. You will order the air defense batteries to fire on the landing forces, or I will have you flayed for cowardice in the face of the enemy. Jarlit wilted under the accusation of cowardice, and the 4th Prime casually tossed the datapad he was holding in his right hand onto the desktop between them with a loud clatter. See for yourself, Force Leader Jarlit. Jarlit leaned forward and picked up the pad with a shaking hand before looking closely at the screen and quickly reading it 3 times to verify the legitimacy of the new orders. The proper codes and order procedures were there, as were the DNA verifications of the higher-ups proving the orders went down the proper chain of command to the 4th Prime. He instinctively felt the orders were faked, but that was not possible considering the security protocols put in place to prevent such an occurrence from happening in the first place. The king's control over the military was absolute, and the 1st Prime was the king's proxy in all things, which meant the orders were legitimate if they came directly from him as verified by the pad. I will obey, 4th Prime, Jarlit said with far more conviction than he felt before thumping his chest in proper deference and hurrying out of the command center to carry out the new orders. The feeling of being misled pervaded his mind and spirit, and he tried his best to ignore it. Perhaps he was a coward after all, like the 4th Prime had said he was, and he was just feeling fear instead. He hopped quickly to the nearby Air Defense Command Center and croaked loudly to get everyone's attention as he entered. We have received new orders from the 1st Prime. Target the invaders and shoot them down now. All the technicians and operators froze, staring at him in disbelief for several solar seconds before he roared at them to do as he commanded. They sprang into action at that and began to activate the complex anti-air systems to follow their orders and defend Faria Prime. The feeling that he was following illegal orders grew stronger, and he could see that the others felt the same way as they gave each other furtive glances filled with fear and resentment. They had all seen the 2 Malit dreadnoughts in the system on the sensors, and they all heard the broadcast from the honored elder threatening to punish them if they dared to attack their human allies. Ready, Force Leader, his sub-leader called out in a trembling voice. Jarlit, upon hearing those words, felt the past, the present, and the still yet unhappened future being compressed into a critical inflection point, and he knew the choice he made now would forever change the fate of his people. Fire. Malit Scout Ship. Watcher of Trilfer. Polar orbit of the 3rd moon, 328,272 likhals from Faria Prime. Hrethnir felt a rage it had never experienced before welling up within as it watched hundreds of the sons and daughters of the Magnati being shot out of the sky as they dropped through the atmosphere, risking their lives to liberate a world from the clutches of evil. Its precious kin children were being murdered before its very eyes in defiance of the Malit domain, and the exosuit hands closed and opened several times in response to Hreth-Nir's desire to punish those who dared defy it. Activating the neural command implant, Hreth-Nir joined with the companion AI controlling the dreadnought, positioned at the L1 Lagrange point, and it allowed the AI to access its feelings and thoughts, conveying Hreth-Nir's intentions and desires to the companion in mere milliseconds. I understand, my liege. Make them pay for killing our kin children, my companion. Go and avenge the sons and daughters of the Magnati who are being betrayed by those they mean to liberate. Anyone who raises a hand against them shall be destroyed. Any who obey and do not raise a hand against them are to be spared. As you command, so shall it be done, my liege. Go, my companion. Hreth-Nir turned back towards the viewer at the noises being made by Ambassador Skarl, the first signs of consciousness returning to him since he had collapsed on the panel. Moving the exosuit forward to assist him, Hrethner accessed the Farian databanks for information on how best to help the ambassador return his inverted stomach back to where it belonged. There was a distressing lack of information on the subject, and Hrethner wondered what to do as it finally reached the ambassador and gently placed the suit hands on Skarl's back. Skarl moaned at the touch, his eyes still closed, though they were starting to weakly flutter. "Ambassador Skarl, I am here," Hrethner said softly, careful to modulate its speakers to the appropriate volume for the situation. Skarl moaned again, and his eyes finally began to open, revealing glazed pupils that seemed to not be focused on anything. Hrethner gently shook the ambassador's back, hoping the stimulus would encourage him to recover faster, as it looked back at the viewer to monitor the response of the Farian Navy to the dreadnought's actions. Companion had already released all the destroyers contained within, and they were now taking up an overwatch position over the Farian ships as the dreadnought headed for the planet. So far, the Farian ships near the planet and the Farian ships in the outer system have obeyed, and it prayed they continued to do so as the weapons ports on the silvery hull of the dreadnought began to deploy. Hearing wet sounds, Hrethner directed his lenses at the source and saw Ambassador Skarl feebly trying to push his stomach back into his mouth. A shiver of revulsion passed through Hrethner at the thought of having to touch the wobbling mass of digestive tissue, and it forced itself to ignore the feeling and assist the ambassador. Hrethner turned off the speakers and groaned loudly in disgust as the sensors of his exosuit hands felt the slick texture and jiggling of the Farian's innards while he carefully assisted the ambassador. The loud gagging and retching of the ambassador triggered a sympathetic reaction in Hrethner, and its own bile rose up in response to the sickening experience. With a final disgusting slurp, the ambassador finally got the stomach back down, and he visibly shook as he leaned on the console, gasping from what was surely an uncomfortable experience. Hrethner turned its attention back to the viewer as Companion settled into orbit and asked for final verification to fire on the surface. A momentary hesitation came over Hrethner, unsure if it was making the right decision. A moment later, all doubt was burned away by a rage that demanded to be satiated as another 33 of its kin-children were shot down, their life signs disappearing from the sensor network. Do it, Companion. They must suffer the consequences of daring to defy the Malit domain. I understand, my liege. On the viewer, dozens of weapon ports activated, the invisible particle beams only able to be seen by the ionization of their passage through the atmosphere before thermal blooms appeared on the sensor networks. Within 3 seconds, over 27 Farian military targets were destroyed, simply vanishing under the violent onslaught of the subatomic particles smashing into them. Hrethner heard the ambassador moaning with grief, and it ignored him, not willing to allow compassion to sway it from the decision already made. "No. Please, honored elder. Please don't do this to us. You know we are innocent." Hrethner ignored the desperate pleas of the ambassador, a stone forming where its heart used to be as it watched more of its kin-children being shot down.